Are you a footballer who wants to maximize your performance to succeed at the top level? My new ebook, Strength and Conditioning 101 for Female Footballers, is now available. For free and instant access, simply head on over to jacobandre.com. Link is in the show notes. The Women's Footy Podcast is brought to you by Fitness Works. With 3 convenient locations in Darwin at Darwin City, Nightcliff and Allawa, these gyms are world-class family exercise centres offering the latest equipment with friendly and fully qualified staff. For more information, check out fitnessworksnt.com.au. G'day and welcome to the Women's Footy Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Andre, and today I'm answering the question, what are the key components of a proper warm-up and cool-down? Now, I'm going to talk about the warm-up first, and I'm going to talk about it from 2 different perspectives, a strength session and a conditioning session. So in the strength sessions leading up to a warm-up, personally, I'm not much of a fan. I probably shouldn't say, but I don't really like spending heaps of time. I just want to get into it. So the one main thing that I suggest that you do, even if you don't do anything else, is at least do a warm-up set at a lighter weight. If it's bench press, for example, with just the bar. If it's squats, with just the bar. Deadlifts, just the bar. Shoulder press, just the bar. And use a bar that is appropriate for you, whether that's a 20 kilo bar or a 10 kilo bar, or maybe even a 15 kilo bar if you can find one in between. So at least go through the movement of that exercise. And so those 4 exercises I just listed are compound lift movements, and they are leading into the Olympic lift. So they're your fundamental Olympic lift type exercises: bench press, shoulder press, squats, and deadlifts. So at least, if nothing else, go through a set with just body weight and or just the bar. So if you are going to go through a full warm-up, however, what I suggest to do a proper warm-up in the gym is to start off with some shoulder prehab exercises. Prehab meaning rehabilitation, so doing it before you need to rehabilitate. So rehabilitate means that you have had an injury and you are trying to rehabilitate from that injury, the muscles, the joint, and so on. So prehab is sort of preventing that injury from occurring in the first place. The additional benefit of doing these prehab exercises is that you will generate blood flow to the area. And the shoulder joint is a joint capable of a lot of movement in a lot of different directions. So what I suggest is to start off with 3 shoulder prehab exercises. Now, the shoulder joint is acted upon by 7 different muscles, 4 of which are rotator cuff muscles. And so what we're going to do is work the shoulder joint through external rotation, internal rotation, and abduction. Abduction means that you are moving the body part away from the midline of the body. Adduction, adduction, is adding that body part back to the midline of the body. So this is abduction, moving away. So you've got your external rotation of the shoulder joint. You can either do it with your elbow down by your side or with your elbow up so that your shoulder joint is at 90 degrees, and you are doing external rotation from there. Internal rotation is the same thing. You can have your elbow down by your side or up so that the shoulder joint is at 90 degrees and you're internally rotating the shoulder joint. Then the third one is the abduction. So moving the shoulder joint away with a straight arm from the body, not going any more than about 30 degrees at the shoulder joint underneath the arm, so that you are fully working the muscles which act upon the shoulder joint, in particular the rotator cuff muscles, and not kicking in the deltoid, which is the muscle on the upper outside of the arm. So there's your 3 prehab exercises for the shoulder joint, and you are going to use a band to do this, preferably a TheraBand, which are those long, flat bands that you can get from the physio. But if you don't have one of them or can't get one, you can use a tube resistance band. Just make sure that it's a nice light band that you can easily perform these exercises, and you're going to perform 1 set of 10 of each of those 3 exercises: external rotation, internal rotation, and abduction. Moving on from there, I like to go into some dynamic movements. So some dynamic stretches, sorry. So with these, the 3 dynamic stretches I like to perform are for the glutes, quads, and hamstrings. So for the glutes, you're going to pull your knee up towards your chest So same hand, same knee, same hand on the outside underneath of the knee, and you pull your ankle in towards your body. So you're not pulling your knee straight up, but it's on an angle so that the foot is turned inwards. So you grab, if you're doing your right leg, for example, with your right hand, you grab the knee, and your left hand, you grab on the lower shin or the ankle joint, and you pull the knee in towards your body with the foot slightly turned inwards. And that's just going to follow the grain of the glute muscle a little bit better than just pulling the knee straight up. Perform that, hold that for a couple of seconds, 1 to 2 seconds, and then step forward, move on to the other leg, and then alternate so that you do 10 on each leg. The quad walking stretch is where you grab the foot, same hand, same foot, and you try to keep your hips square and your knees together. Hold it for 1 to 2 seconds, step forward and perform it on the other leg. You're going to perform 10 on each leg. And the last one is the walking hamstring stretch, which is where you hinge at the hips. So you bend forward and you pretend to kind of scoop up a ball. You must keep your back straight in this walking hamstring stretch, because as soon as you arch your back over, you are just hanging out in the back muscles and you are not properly, truly stretching your hamstring. So in order to stretch your hamstring properly, you must keep your back straight so that you are engaging the hamstring as best as you can in the stretch, and not just simply getting lower because of the extra flexibility you've got through your back as opposed to your hamstrings. So keeping your back straight, hinging at the hips, and one leg straight, one leg bent, and then you pretend to scoop up a ball. You don't have to scoop up a ball. People like to do it because it just makes it a bit smoother transition into the stretch and then out of the stretch. Now I'm going to ask you to do 4 different versions of this hamstring one. Most people only do 1. So one is with the leg straight and the toe up, and perform 3 on each leg like this. The second one is with the knee bent and the toe up, and you do 3 on each leg. Then you have the toe down with the leg straight and the toe up with the leg straight. So you've got the 4. So you change whether the toe is up or down and whether the knee is bent or straight. So with a straight knee, you've got with the toe up, straight knee, toe down, bent knee, toe up, bent knee, toe down, and you perform 3 on each leg of each of those 4 different variations, and you'll hit different parts of the hamstring and get the hamstring to warm up much more effectively. Moving on from there, we go into our dynamic movements. And so this is where we're kind of moving, rather than stretching individual muscles and muscle groups, we are starting to engage much more muscle and move through the joints. So the first one is a sumo squat. I like to do this over about 10 meters. So we are going to perform a sumo squat. So feet a little bit wider than hip width apart, toes pointed out on a 45-degree angle, squat down, come up, go as low as you can, keeping your back straight, pivot around. And so we're going to go side on. So you pivot around and then do the other side so that we can make it moving. Otherwise you can do it on the spot up and down, but I like to kind of move across distance. This makes it a bit more interesting, and you're going to go over 10 meters of this, or do 5 on each in each direction. So pivot to the other side, sumo squat down, pivot, stand up, pivot to the other side, sumo squat down, stand up, so on. The second one is lunges. So we're going to start off with normal lunges over the 10 meters. So with the pelvis tilted posteriorly, so that we're thinking about tipping water out the back of our bucket. If our pelvis is a bucket, if you've heard me talk about running mechanics, you'll know what I'm talking about there. But pretending that your pelvis is a bucket filled all the way up to the brim, any movement is going to spill water out. So we slightly tip the bucket backwards, so a posterior tilt of the pelvis. And then from there, we're going to perform a normal squat so that the back knee is directly underneath the hip. Then from there, we're going to step out a little bit further and aim to try and leave the knee out the back. So we get a good stretch through the hip flexor as well, and the adductor, which is the groin. And then from there, we're then going to reach up with our opposite arm to the leg that's in front. So if we step forward with our right leg, our back leg is almost straight out the back. And then we're reaching up with the left hand. And that's going to give you an even better stretch through that side of the body that the arm is extended up, as well as the hip flexor and groin. So we're going to start with normal lunges that are normal steps so that the knee is underneath the hip. And then we extend out those steps and make them longer, trying to ultimately straighten the back leg out more and more as we go over the 10 meters lunging. And then we then reach up on the last couple with the opposite arm to the leg that's in front. Then our last dynamic movement is leg swings into arabesque. So we are going to leg swing up, and then go back, pointing our toe of our back foot back towards the heel of the planted foot so that it's not opening the hips up. Because if we point our toe outwards, it's going to open the hips up, and we want to keep the hips square. So you're going to continue to point the toe back towards the heel, the back of the heel of the planted foot. And then from there, you can put your hands wherever you would like. You can put them on your hips, out to the side, or out in front like Superman. And you are going to perform 10 meters of this, or 5 on each leg. So that is a warm-up exercise for the gym. It's also what I like to use in a running warm-up for a conditioning session as well. In the gym, from there, with those prehab exercises, the walking stretches, and the dynamic movements, that is then where I would suggest that you go into performing one set of 10 reps, or probably 10 reps. If you're doing more reps in a workout, like it's a 6 rep or an 8 rep session of compound lifts, then you could just perform that number of reps. But I like to keep it at 10 for simplicity's sake. So of the compound lifts, perform 10 reps with the bar of that exercise. You don't need to do it for all the accessory ones, just the compound lifts. Hey, Jacob here with a quick message. If you're enjoying this episode of the Women's Footy Podcast and you want more fitness tips for the female footballer, I encourage you to join our Instagram channel, Footy Fit Fam. Link is in the show notes. Now, back to the show. From there, as I was saying, if that's all you do, that may be enough, but that is not a proper warm-up. This episode is about a proper warm-up. So the prehab exercises, walking stretches, dynamic movements, and then a set of 10 with the bar of the compound lifts that you're performing in that workout. You can do, if you're doing, for example, bench press and squats in one session as compound lifts, you can do a warm-up set of bench press and then a warm-up set of squats straight away if you'd like, and then go back to do all your bench press and then go and do all your squats. But the way I like to do it is to just do the warm-up set with the bar of the bench press, do all of my bench press sets, and then when I go over to squats, do the warm-up set with the bar of squats, and then go into all of my sets for my squats. Then you don't need to do it for the accessory stuff. Moving on to conditioning, and as I said, I like to, with the conditioning, do the same in terms of the walking stretches and the dynamic movements. Now, you don't need to be doing the TheraBand stuff. You don't need to be doing all that prehab stuff for the shoulder because you're running. So what I would suggest is that you start off with your run-throughs. A lot of people start off with just running a lap. It's my pet hate. You can do it if you really, really want, but I don't think you need it. And more importantly, I think it encourages poor running mechanics, because usually people are just sort of like plodding along, doing a lap, which they're not really enjoying. And they're spending too much time on the ground, and they're just reinforcing poor running mechanics. And when there's only two things that matter when it comes to running, and that is 1, time on the ground, and 2, a power into the ground, those two things are not happening when you go for a slow warm-up lap. So what I like to start with is run-throughs, and we incorporate our running mechanics into our warm-up. So we start off with a 50% run-through, and we do 5 run-throughs, increasing by 10% each time, with those walking stretches and dynamic movements incorporated into the walk back after each run through. So we do a run through at 50% over 40 meters. You can change the distance. I think 40 meters is the ideal amount of distance. You can go out to 60. I feel like that's a little bit too far. I certainly wouldn't do any more than 60, but I think you can do 60 if you would like. In terms of lesser distance, 20 meters would be the absolute minimum, but I highly recommend you do 40 meters. I think that's probably the right amount that you would need to do in terms of being able to practice your running mechanics and warm up effectively. So I would do a 50% run through over 40 meters, and then I would have a section of about 10 meters marked out on the way back. Probably not the first 10 meters, so from 40 to 30, and probably not the last 10 meters, so from 10 to 0. I would probably make it somewhere in the middle, so from the 30 to 20 meter mark, or it could even be a 20 meter distance from the 30 to the 10 meter mark. And so that way you turn around after you run through, you walk back a little bit, and then you go into your other elements of your warm-up, which would be your walking stretches and your dynamic movements. The way I would do it after the 50% run through is I would do all walking stretches in that first one. So I would do 10 meters from the 30-meter mark to the 20-meter mark of walking glute stretch, 10 meters. So from the 20-meter mark to the 10-meter mark of walking quad stretches, and then 10 meters of, so from the 10-meter mark to the 0-meter mark of walking hamstring stretches. And so I would get all three of those walking stretches done after that first run through. Then I would focus on running mechanics again over 60%, over 40 meters for 60%. And I would walk back and I would do our first dynamic movement. So 10 meters to 20 meters would be dedicated to the sumo squats. Then the 70%, and I would do the dynamic movement, which would then be the lunges, 10 to 20 meters of lunges. I think 10 meters is enough for all of these. And then I would do the 80%, and I would come back doing the, what was next? The leg swings into arabesque. And then from there, I would then do the 90%, and that would be the last one. After that one, if there's anything else that you want to warm up or perform, you can do that. And I would encourage you to do it in that time. Otherwise, you simply just walk straight back after that last one, because then you can grab yourself a drink. You've done 5 run throughs. You've done your 3 walking stretches, your 3 dynamic movements, and then you walk back, grab a drink if you need one, want one, and then you go into your running drills. The first running drill that I would certainly incorporate is pogos. And I didn't mention pogos actually in the strength session. I would also incorporate pogos into the strength session. So the pogos in the strength session are just very low level plyometrics. That is after all of the warm up is performed, before the warm up set of the first exercise. So you do the TheraBand exercises for the shoulder prehab, you do your walking stretches, your dynamic movements, and then you go into your pogos. And pogos are generally about 10 seconds worth times by 3 sets. So you do 10 seconds, say it's on a 30-second cycle. So you take 20 seconds rest, another 10 seconds of pogos. And so with pogos, you're thinking about keeping everything really locked and braced, toes up into the top of your shoes, spread your toes in your shoes, roll up onto the ball of your foot with your heel as low to the ground as possible without touching the ground. And then from there, keeping everything locked, ankle, knees, hips, and core, you are then just bouncing up and down in like you're a pogo stick in a really braced position. And I would perform 3 sets of that. Those timeframes would increase over time depending on where you're at in the season. So after you've done it for a while, I'd move it out to 15 seconds or 30 seconds, and potentially it could even become longer. But I would certainly incorporate these also in the conditioning sessions. So after you've done all of your warm-up run-throughs and those stretches and dynamic movements, I'll then go into pogos, but what I would refer to as power pogos. So I personally like to start with just normal pogos to begin with, just to kind of feel like I'm warming up my tendons and warming up, getting ready for that more sort of forceful plyometrics. So I'll do a set of, say, 10 seconds of just normal pogos, and then I would go into power pogos, which is the exact same thing, but you are going for max height. So go over 10 meters. So instead of doing them on the spot for a time in like you would in a strength session, in a conditioning session, I would do them over distance because you've already got those distances marked out for your run throughs. So I would go over 10 meters and I would perform power pogos. Same thing, toes up in the top of your shoes, up on the ball of your foot with your heel as low to the ground as possible without touching the ground. Keep everything locked, ankle, knee, hips, and core. Again, with the pelvis, pretending your pelvis is a bucket of water filled all the way up to the brim, tipping water at the back of the bucket. So posteriorly tilting your pelvis so that you help to engage your hips and core. And then you go for max height on your pogos, or even like 75% of max height, but going for more height than you do in your normal pogos when you do a gym session. So you're going for a bit more height and you're bouncing over 10 meters. Walk back and perform 2 more sets of that. So you've got 3 sets in total. Now, some people will kind of go, what do I do with my hands here? And they'll look a bit funny. They'll feel a bit funny. What I recommend is with your hands, keep them down by your sides, sort of on your, just above where your pockets would be. And a lot of people kind of, the way the movement goes, it helps them to do small circles in reverse. So small backward circles with your hands, coordinated in time with the pogo, so that as you bounce, you kind of do a small little circle with your hands backwards. So it's a kind of backwards circle with your hands. From there, going into drills. So these drills are all about helping to reinforce good running mechanics. So this is breaking it down from a whole skill where you're performing the whole skill of running in those run throughs over 50, 60, 70, 80, 90%. And now we're doing part practice. So we're doing part of the skill. So breaking up different elements of the running mechanics cycle, good running mechanics cycle. And I would perform a skip, a exchange. I'm not going to go into detail on what that is. That's for a video elsewhere, but I would do the A skip, A exchange. You can do B skip, but I don't like to do B skip because I find most people, it encourages them to kind of kick their foot out and reach and then create a kind of like dragging effect as opposed to coming straight down with the foot hitting the ground and bouncing back up again. So I often leave out B skip, sometimes keep C skip in, which is where you go up on one A skip, out to the side on the next skip, and then up again. So it's up, out, up on the same leg, and then alternate to the other leg, up, out, up. It's up to you. It's quite a complex movement, and it takes a bit of practice to coordinate it. But you can add that one in. Then there's from there, the next main one I would focus on is high knees and then scissor drill. So there's only 4 drills outside of the pogos that I really think are important that I encourage people to do when it comes to doing their drills in a proper warm-up for a conditioning session. And that is the A skip, A exchange, the high knees, and the scissor drill. Now, the A skip is the difference between A skip and A exchange is that the feet swap over at the bottom in an A skip, and in an A exchange, the feet swap over at the top. So when you perform the A skip, your both feet come down and meet the ground together. They cross over at the bottom. And in an A exchange, one foot is up and then the other one comes up and they swap over in the air. So think about swapping the feet at the top as opposed to at the bottom. Then from there, the high knees, what we're thinking about is all that good running mechanics, tipping the water out the back of the bucket. So posteriorly tilting the pelvis, pulling the toes up towards the shins, even thinking about spreading the toes within the shoes to make sure you've got that good engagement of the lower leg muscles in the front of the lower leg, which is your tibialis anterior, to make sure that's primed, ready for contact when it hits the ground, a nice, strong, solid, rigid ankle joint so that the heel is as low to the ground as possible without touching the ground on foot contact. And then from there, springing back up as quickly as possible. So thinking about pulling your rib cage down towards your hips, almost like you're making like a C-curve type shape position, almost like a banana, so that you stay braced through the core, and then crossing your hands over on your hips as if you are thinking about brushing sand off your palms on your pockets. The main thing here, though, is the lower body. The hands is just something that comes later, but with the high knees, it's toes up, knees up to hip height, and we're thinking about keeping our heel as low to the ground as possible without touching the ground and staying as strong and rigid in the ankle joint as possible. And then from there, bringing the bottom of the rib cage down towards the hips to ensure that your core is braced and strong when you hit the ground on every foot strike. We go over 10 meters for that, and then we do our scissor drill, which is where we keep our legs straight. And this is about getting the foot strike underneath the body. But again, flexing the toes up so that we're trying to pull the toes towards the shin, which is called dorsiflexion. So on every scissor drill, straight-legged drill, where your legs are going out, you're pulling your toes back towards your shin and you're thinking about getting the foot to land directly underneath the body, and we're practicing getting that bounce. Essentially, all of these drills here are variations and extensions on the pogo exercise. So it's about building up that reactivity of the tendons, particularly the Achilles tendon, as well as practicing running mechanics. So as much as possible, really strengthening up those tendons, because the Achilles tendon is probably the most important element in the body when it comes to running fast and jumping high. Then from there, I like to do just 1 or 2 run-throughs. After having done all of those drills, I would recommend doing a 75% run through once again, and then a 95% run through once again. Then you can go into your session, whether it's speed, agility, repeat sprints, speed endurance. Probably not so important in an aerobic run and not in a swim. In a swim, I think you can just go out and just start swimming some laps. We're not actual swimmers. We're just swimming for the aerobic fitness. So probably not as important. Starting to swim is probably okay. You can do some arm circles, do some other stuff if you'd like. Certainly can be incorporating those TheraBand prehab shoulder exercises. And if you wanted to, you could definitely be doing the walking stretches and dynamic movements. In terms of our long runs, again, you can do that stuff if you would like. If you were going to do something, I would incorporate the walking stretches and the dynamic movements, and then go out and start running. Start with a gentle walk to begin with for a couple of minutes, and then get into your run. If you want to do a proper warm-up. And in terms of cooling down, it's been shown that stretching after, in a cool down is not as effective as what just simply moving is. So you have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of cooling down? And for most people, it's just about kind of leading into finishing off, like bringing the heart rate down and getting back to steady state, to normal, and then being recovered as quickly as possible. So if your goal is to increase flexibility, doing that straight after a training session or a game is not the best time to be doing it. So stretching is not the best at that point in time for that reason, for that purpose. If you are sitting there holding a static stretch and your purpose is to lower your heart rate, it's also not the most effective thing to do. So after training or after a game, the best thing to do after that is to bring your heart rate down more slowly. So continue to move. Light, gentle movement is the best. And that could be simply walking, or if you're near a pool, it could be jumping in a pool and moving around. It is more about movement than stretching. So by continuing to move, so gentle, so just some light walking after a game to bring your heart rate back down to kind of normal. And then from there to continue to flush out those toxins that have built up in your body as a result of all of the work that you've just done, is going to be much more effective than anything else. In terms of recovery, you can then jump into an ice bath, which is going to help to continue to remove those toxins from the body, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff that goes on with ice baths. It's another topic. But from there, you can then the next day get into some more recovery type stuff, like, again, ice baths if you want, pool sessions, gentle movement like walking. It could even be a yoga practice or some form of yoga session as well, where you're doing that lengthening of the muscles in a kind of sequential way. The last thing, though, in terms of the cool down that I do want to touch on, in addition to the bringing your heart rate down slowly and continuing to move to help the body flush those toxins from the body, which is going to release through sweat and urine, is to hydrate and to make sure that you are drinking water. You can have other stuff. I don't want to get into that because that's not the topic here. That's going to help you replace electrolytes, for example. But water is going to be really effective, because if you are trying to flush those toxins out of the body, the way they are going to be removed is through your sweat and urine. So it's important that you don't just walk around, but that you also make sure you rehydrate and put water back into your body in order to help you sweat out those toxins and urinate out those toxins. So the best way to think about it is, particularly if you're playing in hot and humid conditions, then weigh yourself before the game, weigh yourself after the game, and that difference in weight is going to be the amount of water you have essentially lost. So if you've lost 3 kilos in a game, for example, or in training, then what I recommend is you drink 3 liters of water, because a liter is approximately equivalent to 1 kilo. So if you have lost 3 kilos, you have essentially lost 3 liters of water. You need to put that 3 liters of water back into your body, but your body can only absorb a certain amount of water at a time. So you can't go and drink 3 liters in one go. So your body can only absorb approximately 1 liter of water per hour. So what that means is that 3 liters of water is going to have to go back in over 3 hours. So I would recommend having 1 liter of water every hour for the number of kilograms that you have lost. So if you have lost 3 kilos, then you drink 1 liter of water every hour for 3 hours. I would actually go a little bit beyond that. I'd probably go to 1.25 liters, so that you're just slightly overhydrating. It's not bad to slightly overhydrate. It is to excessively overhydrate. But going over a little bit is probably going to be a little bit better than going under a little bit. And so it just means you're probably going to be going to the toilet a bit more, and you're probably going to sweat a bit more, but that's the whole purpose of it. You want to encourage sweating and urine so that you are flushing out those toxins. So if you can combine gentle movement like walking after a game or training with hydrating correctly and putting in the right amount of water into your body to make sure you hydrate so you flush out those toxins, and then you then add in ice baths if possible, either straight after the game or even the next day, because there's so many benefits to ice baths that go beyond the purpose of this episode, then that is going to be the best way to proper cool down. So I hope you have learnt a lot in this episode. If you've got any questions, please send them to me on Instagram at Jacob_Andre, or send an email to info@jacobandre.com. Ask your questions. I'll turn them into an episode, and I'd love to help you out with helping you maximize your performance to take your game or your performance to the next level. Are you a footballer who wants to maximize your performance to succeed at the top level? My new ebook, Strength and Conditioning 101 for Female Footballers, is now available. For free and instant access, simply head on over to jacobandre.com. Link is in the show notes.